Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, thank you all so much for coming. We're happy to have you here tonight. My name is Charlotte Brett. I am the Executive Director of New York Green, which is a local nonprofit organization headquartered in Batavia that works with Genesee County and Genesee area municipalities on sustainable land use planning and projects. And we are thrilled to be here tonight in cooperation with the Town of Batavia to talk to you about a proposed new park. With me is Molly Ventura with Molly Ventura Landscape Architects. Molly has been developing the conceptual design, so she'll be talking to you about that. And Mr. Post and Andrew McGuire are here from the town. And also here from the town, I'm sorry.
Yeah, all three of us.
Okay, wonderful. So a little bit of site history. So this parcel here, it's right here surrounding Womack Pond is the property that we're talking about. It was originally part of the VA campus, and the VA deeded the property to the City of Batavia in 1968 to be used for a public purpose. And in 2008, the deed was released, so the city then had full ownership of the land. It was released by the U.S. Secretary of Veterans Affairs with some caveats. And that included that sidewalks and signage and pond revitalization would be required in order to provide both recreational access and therapeutic alternatives for VA long-term patients and behavioral health residents. The Town of Batavia then purchased the property from the city in 2012 and took on that responsibility. So work that was completed after the town purchased the property, the town did some dredging in the pond. They provided drainage with an outlet. They installed grass. They removed some ash trees that were dying or dead that presented a public health risk. And then they installed ADA compliant sidewalks on both the north and west sides of the property. The VA completed a groundwater diversion project, so they piped clean, cool groundwater from their property into the pond to provide some additional water for the pond. And then New York Green worked with the town last year to obtain some funding to complete a design for the new park. So the funding was provided by the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Legacy Funds, which are administered by the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. And we have a one-year time frame on the grant. So the funding was released in June of last year, and we're completing the scope of this grant by June of this year. And what the grant included was an environmental review, a topographic survey, conceptual design, stakeholder and community engagement, and preparation of engineering design plans and cost estimates. So the timeline, to be a little bit more specific, it's in what's happened so far. We kicked off the project with a number of stakeholders at an on-site meeting. And the stakeholders are basically, everybody here is a stakeholder. Everyone that lives in the area is really a stakeholder as well who may want to use the park. But who we started with in the initial planning was the entities that either would have some sort of decision-making authority over what happened at the park, as well as the surrounding neighbors, just to make sure that we were coordinating with everybody who would be the most affected. And so the Town of Batavia is a stakeholder. The City of Batavia is a stakeholder because the property is located, even though it's owned by the town, it's located in the city limits. Genesee County Chamber of Commerce was a participating stakeholder. They have their headquarters across the street, and they've been great participating. Genesee County Parks, Paul Osborne has been participating. Genesee County Planning has been participating. The Genesee County Sheriff's Department is a stakeholder who has been participating. They are a neighboring property owner. This property abuts their property, as well as the Veterans Affairs. And then the U.S. Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, who's also a neighboring property, New York Green, and Delta Development of Western New York, who owns and oversees the Monsignor Kirby Apartments, which are also a neighboring property. Hi, come on in. Please sign in and put a name tag on if you don't mind. So we kicked that off with the stakeholders in June, and then in July and August, the topographic survey was done, as well as the wetland delineation. So those were key pieces of information that were needed to feed the design. We had Molly developed 3 preliminary concepts that we brought to the town and said, you know, here are a few different options of what could be done. The town had some comments on those were revised. And then in September, we had a second stakeholder meeting and brought 3 concepts to the stakeholders, got their input, and it was really kind of a buffet of, we like this from this one, we like that from this, and Molly did a great job of putting them all together. In November and December, we coordinated with various permitting agencies and other regulatory agencies. So we completed SHPO consultation, and we met with both the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the state DEC to have preliminary meetings about required permits. And then earlier this month, we had a 3rd meeting with the stakeholder group, went over the final design concept, and now we're here tonight to review that with the public. Following the meeting tonight, the Town of Batavia Engineering Department is completing design documents and cost estimates so that at the end of this grant, we will have a set of design plans that, once we have funding, can be put out to bid to select a contractor. So with that, I will turn it over to Molly to talk about the conceptual design.
Okay, before I get into the concept that we have for the design of the park, I just want to give a little bit of background and context. So these are some images. The first thing we did with our stakeholders was to do an on-site walk and kind of talk about opportunities and constraints and problems that might be on the site. So this is the north edge of the site along Park Road. There's an existing sidewalk. And as we were walking this site, we thought there would be a nice opportunity to take a path that goes down towards the pond, between these nice mature willow trees, and then swing out in front of this willow tree and come back up and hook in with the sidewalk. So that's what these pictures are showing. Where these people are walking is about the route where our proposed path will go. They'll swing out over the water with a boardwalk and come back up to the sidewalk. So you'll see that in the concept, but I just want to show you those pictures. This again is that sidewalk along Park Road. This is after we go around that willow tree I was talking about. We would come back and swing up and hook in with the sidewalk here, or we would, the path will also swing south and start to make a loop around Womack Pond. So it's going to go, there's a clearing there right now where a water main was installed, so it's going to start going down that clearing. After a while, that clearing peters out, so you know our project will have to clear the way for the new path. But those are some existing photos, if you're familiar with the site or not. Kind of gives you some context for at least part of our project. And then we have some inspiration images, what we're trying to create here. So the idea of having a boardwalk in some places that skirts around the pond. We're hoping to keep the view open, so as long as the drop isn't too high, we can have a boardwalk that just has like these little wood curbs on the side instead of handrails. It keeps like strollers and wheelchairs from going off the side, but it keeps your view open. And the idea that coming off the main boardwalk, we could have these spurs that would have some smaller overlook areas to actually get a lot closer to the pond. Another idea is, this is Gallagher Pier. So when you're driving along the Skyway and you look out over the lake, one of the things that was built in the last 10, 15 years or so is this Gallagher Pier. And it always catches my attention, this sort of sculptural shade form that's over the seating area along Gallagher Pier. And it says to the people going by, hey, there's something there that looks pretty cool. We should stop by and check this out next time when we have a chance. So we'd like to do some feature like that. As you're going down Park Road and you kind of glance towards the pond, you might see something like this that could attract your attention and make you want to stop and visit. We'd also like to put in a kayak launch. We're not exactly sure what that would look like yet. The one on the left is a fully ADA accessible type of kayak launch. It has even like a lift to get people out of the wheelchair and into their kayak. Or maybe it's just a simpler one that's a pathway going down to the water. This was fashioned out of flat stones and concrete, so people could step down the stones, put their kayak down that smooth ramp in the middle and get it into the water. So these are some ideas of what the kayak launch could potentially look like. And then here's the overall concept. So I'm going to go through all the numbered items on the concept, and I'll use my cursor to show you where they are. So it's labeled as number 1, but it really goes all the way around the pond here, is our pathway around the pond. So the areas that are this dark gray color, we're proposing to be an 8-foot wide asphalt path, or where it's the light gray color, that might be a stone dust path. There are wetlands that surround the pond, and so we're required by the DEC not to put impervious surfaces like regular asphalt in the wetland area, but they will let us make stone dust paths or boardwalk. So that's why you see the paths switching to different colors as we go around. So the paths that are coming directly off the sidewalk and are adjacent to the parking lot and are outside of the wetland is the dark gray color. That'll be asphalt. And then as we start getting into the wetlands, they switch to either this light gray color that's stone dust or this brown color that's boardwalk. So you'll see that switch happening as we go around the pond. But they're all considered ADA accessible surfaces, so that won't be a problem for people with wheelchairs or strollers to traverse these pathways. In some cases, we'll only have a 6-foot wide path, and that's going to be the path coming from the VA, connecting into our main pathway, or the path that's coming from Monsignor Kirby Apartments, connecting into our main pathway. Because those are secondary pathways, they won't have as much traffic as the main pathway. We can do 6-foot wide, a little bit less disturbance and a little bit less cost. Also, you'll see along the path, all the way around the pond, is what's labeled as number 4. These will be 6-foot wide benches. We have them spaced no more than 200 feet apart. That's a good distance for people with physical disabilities, that they can, traverse that distance before someone might just peter out and need a place to sit down. For example, it's the maximum distance a handicapped parking spot can be located from a primary entrance of a building. So there's research that goes into why that distance works. And from my experience, I've found it to be a good distance too when I walk with people with physical disabilities. So we wanted to make sure that we provided those benches strategically located all the way along the path loop. Other amenities that we're going to have, so up here at the entrance, what's labeled as number 5, we'll have a couple benches, we'll have 2 picnic tables that are 8 foot in length, so right near the parking lot, if someone wants to come and have a picnic or set up their fishing supplies and that before they head down to the lake, there'll be a spot to do that. We'll also have some bike racks and a kiosk that'll have park information on it. Number 6, up here, all along the street, we're going to be putting in some new street trees to line Park Road on the north property edge and the west property edge to help soften the space. And trees, big deciduous trees, are also great for environmental reasons. They help absorb stormwater, they help reduce air pollution, they help keep our urban temperatures down. It's called the urban heat island effect, where roofs and pavement absorb a lot of the heat and radiate that back and cause our spaces that are built up to be hotter than undeveloped spaces. So by providing shade, trees help mitigate that effect. When trees shade our pavement, they also help extend the life of that pavement too. So there's a lot of benefits that we will gain by adding street trees along the perimeter of this park. And we also are adding them in strategic clusters closer to this entrance area. Number 7, so Also, around the entrance area where we're going to have some parking, we're going to add a landscape plant bed. So that'll help provide screening of the vehicles from the road as you're driving by. And it'll also help when you're in the park to screen some of the traffic that's going by at that intersection. Also, when we were on site, we really observed how windy it is there, and that can be a little cold and uncomfortable. So having these, we'll have evergreen plantings in here on both sides. That'll help us break the wind and make this seating area and the features that are around the entrance a little more comfortable to be in. We're also, it's labeled as number 8. It's just indicating that we're leaving that clear vision triangle at the entrance open. So even though we're providing landscaping and a park sign, it'll be outside the clear vision triangle so that people, as they're approaching the intersection and wanting to make their turns, nothing that we're going to add is going to impede their vision for turning. There'll be a park median, park sign of some sort, like probably what you call them, but the kind that would be like on a stone base with a nice park name advertising, a monument sign. And then number 10, we're going to be adding an asphalt parking lot for 19 cars, including 2 ADA accessible spaces. We'll also have up here, we're proposing to add at least 2 EV charging stations. Our thought was, that came out of our stakeholder engagement meetings when we were going through the concept. And the thought was that we're so close to the thruway, and people get off the thruway and they charge their cars at Target or other grocery stores. Why not put a couple high-speed charging stations in the park? So give people an option to get off the thruway, charge their cars, take a walk around the pond, and take advantage of what this park has to offer. We're also proposing to put in a first responders memorial right here in the entrance area. And we'll have some opportunities to put in some public art. The spaces that we called out are near where the paths converge and split, so you get a lot of traffic going by them here, and also here where again the paths merge and split. We're proposing a veterans memorial down in this area, closer to where the VA hospital's access point is to the main pathway around the pond. And in this area also, a picnic shelter with a lawn between the picnic shelter and the park where you could have small gatherings or events. Also, a result of our stakeholder engagement was a suggestion to make sure that we put in some vegetation along the pathway here between the pond, the picnic shelter, and this lawn area to try and buffer and deter the geese. We know what a mess that they can make on our park pathways, so we'll do what we can to make it a little more difficult for the geese to get onto that area. Number 17 is a gazebo, so we'll have a spur coming off of our main pathway that'll go actually out over the open water, and we'll have an octagonal shaped gazebo there with some seating. It'll be an opportunity to do some fishing, or say you're visiting the park and it starts to sprinkle, a place to get some shelter, or even hang out in the rain and enjoy the park and the sound of the rain falling. Number 19 over here is an overlook, and that's when I was kind of envisioning might be something like I showed you from that Gallagher Pier that you can view from the Skyway. This would be a boardwalk that goes out over the water, and it'll have some kind of shade structure over it that will make it more comfortable to sit there, but also provide a focal point for people to see as they're driving by on Park Road here. And there'll be some benches and some interpretive signage there too. Number 20 is a smaller scale overlook, so more like I showed you the scale on those inspiration images, where you're just coming off the main pathway with a spur, and there'll be a small little overlook area. Get a different experience along your journey. And then number 21, that's just a gate, so the VA will have a gate that they can control the access to and from their property. And then over here we've got access to the Monsignor Kirby apartments. We worked with Delta Development to make sure that they're on board with that, and they like that idea and think it would be a great amenity for their residents there. Some other improvements that aren't specifically pictured include clearing of the underbrush in this area so that we can have some better sight lines from the parking area into the park and towards the pond. Some interpretive panels that will be all along the route. We could talk about environmental features. We could talk about the history of the site. We could talk about history of the VA hospital. It hasn't really been discussed what the subject of the interpretive panels will be. But other than that, we want to talk about nature and the environment, considering our grant and the incentive to create this property in the first place, to provide restorative, nature-based experiences. We'll also be providing pathway and boardwalk lighting. So this would be path-type lighting, which is low down, or bollard-type lighting, which is only about this high, not lights high up on poles. So that's the gist of the concept. And some other things just to point out for context. This is the sheriff's office down here, the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, and Homeland Security, Monsignor Kirby Apartments. So these were all stakeholders that Charlotte mentioned who have been part of this planning process. So I'll put this back up if anybody has any questions. And we also have some prints that we can put up on the easel and point to. And we have a couple questions in the back that we'd like you to take a look at and answer after the presentation too. But from our project point of view, our next steps, as Charlotte already said, will be to finalize the design plans. So I'll be working with the town engineers, and we'll translate this concept into construction drawings. We still need to pick a name for the park, so that's one of the sheets in the back of the room where I invite if you have any ideas for a new name for the park. Once we have the construction documents in place, it'll be time to find funding to actually construct it. We'll have to get some permits for the construction, and then we'll build the park, and then it will be open as a nice amenity for the community. Oops. And Charlotte, you want to do the funding acknowledgement?
Yes, it is very clear in our grant that we have to use the right words here, so I'm going to read. So this project has been made possible with funding from the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Legacy Funds administered by the Community Foundation for Greater Buffalo. The Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Legacy Funds were established at the Community Foundation to provide support to 4 areas that were important to Mr. Wilson: caregivers, community assets, design and access, and youth sports. Endowment funds like these created to honor Mr. Wilson are designed to grow over time and provide funding for charitable causes according to a client's wishes. So with that, we will put the drawing up so that you can come look at the board. Please do help yourself to snacks, and then there are markers on the windowsills next to the 4 questions. We would love it if you would take some time to share your thoughts and also to talk to us one-on-one, unless anybody had anything you wanted to comment or ask as a group before we break. Yes?
I have a question. For years here in Batavia, there's always been a need or a want for a dog park.
That was my comment.
Yeah. Isn't there an area in this whole section, especially with the VA center having therapy dogs?
So,
Wouldn't it be
Yeah.
advisable, because you don't have to worry about dogs barking, it's not in a neighborhood, and if you did section out a fenced area, it would benefit the VA, and it would also benefit even the canine at the sheriff's department, and it would benefit the whole community.
so I can respond to that. I do a lot of park designs, and I know that dog parks are an important and a popular community asset. Unfortunately, it would not be appropriate, or even we wouldn't even be able to construct it in this park because the park is mostly wetlands. So we cannot clear, in order to have a dog park, you need to clear it, you need to have mowed grass, you need to fence it in so the dogs don't run away. And in order to construct such a thing, I mean, it would take up at minimum all of this space, but we have a creek running through it right now. And like I said, it's wetland, so we really can't clear any of this space. And we're actually very limited by what the DEC will even approve for us to put in, which is why I was explaining it had to be the permeable stone dust path or a boardwalk. So while I support your idea, and I know that they're popular and needed in communities, it isn't something that environmentally or by regulatory standards we could put in this park.
So the DEC already said that even a minimal area, because you can have a fenced-in area, even a small section.
There's actually quite well-developed standards for dog parks, and a dog park is not a minimal area. It needs to be a space where dogs can run and exercise and play.
So you already brought that up to the DEC already and explored that for the residents. So then when they ask that this has already been presented and it's already been said no by many others then.
So we didn't, I was the one that met with DEC and the Corps, and I didn't bring up a dog park, but we did, so the wetland delineation line is hard to see on this map. It's there, but it's the pale blue line. But basically, outside of the pond, it's almost everywhere where there's trees. So it's that pale blue line that was delineated. So most of the property
Is within the
wetland that's going to be regulated by the state and federal governments. And we did have, I won't say that it was contentious because that wouldn't be accurate, but it was a rigorous back and forth about putting in anything. The trail, even understanding that this was a VA property and that it was turned into a public property with requirements to make it available to VA patients for access to nature and therapy. There was still, a concern about anything that we were building. So, the trails, the material of the trails was important, but even having the trails in the wetlands, I mean, we don't have it permitted yet. It is something that we will still have to go through and get permitted. I feel like we can, but with the Corps and the DEC, it'll really be justifying any impact that you have in the wetland. And I mean, you have to go through a process to show that you've avoided all the impacts that you can, and then anything that you couldn't avoid, you've minimized. And then any impacts that you can't minimize any further, you have to mitigate if they're above a certain threshold. And part of that process of avoidance is looking at, well, can you serve the need somewhere else? So I talk to Town of Batavia pretty regularly about things like park planning and other things. So, I will personally put this on my list and make sure that we're talking about that and we're looking.
Well, I can answer that.
Please do, yep.
The town of Batavia has been open for at least 15 years for development of a dog park in the town of Batavia. The town owns property that is developable and is willing to work with whatever collaborative agencies want to assist us in supporting that. So there is acreage, it's identified, and we realize the need. We've had a number of petitions. What we're looking for is a viable partner to assist with the collaboration for the funding of the initial design and the cost of maintenance for that specific sector of the community that would be benefited by that. But the town has been open to that. My board members can confirm that we've had a number of discussions and have the means to assist any agency that wants to come in or an organization or club that wants to start that. We certainly have an open mind toward supporting that. But this venue is the least likely candidate for that type of facility. We have other properties that may serve that purpose better, that are open and able to be developed.
Come and talk to us, because
We're happy to have that
that'd be nice.
conversation.
We just need someone to run it.
Yeah.
Because building is one thing, it's taking care of it.
Oh, exactly.
But we've got a spot, so if you're interested, come to one of our meetings, we'll talk, okay? Absolutely. I have one question. The VA at one time had talked about this pond and incorporating therapy for the veterans, fly fishing. Did they bring that up to you at all?
We've talked a lot about fishing, and the purpose of this trail here coming straight out onto this was that people could come out if they were in wheelchairs or, you know, had any kind of difficulty getting around, that they would sort of have a straight shot and then be over the water so that they could fish. I mean, I don't know if they said fly fishing specifically in the
There's a
meetings.
specific grant, I think, for fly fishing for the VA.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm on the Parks Committee and I know I've talked about it before.
Okay.
And that's something I'm interested in because if they can get that money or we can get the money for that for the park, there might need to be something built there that's a little more inclusive so that they, because where they're going to put their fishing poles and they have to be able to maneuver around.
Got it.
It's something that you might want to talk to the VA a little more in depth about.
Okay.
Because I'm almost sure they talked about that specific fly fishing
Okay.
event.
They've been very involved at the meetings that they couldn't come tonight, but they've been to everything else. I don't remember if they've specifically said fly fishing, but we'll double check with them on
We'll
that.
have to,
Thank
we'll
you.
check,
Yeah.
because that might need specific design
Right.
That's
thing,
why I'm
like, you know,
bringing
the
it up.
back casting area.
Yes, absolutely. And
yeah.
after you get in the water too, I think.
Yeah, I don't
for
think
that,
it's
so-
something you do from the gazebo area.
No, they may have another fishing thing that they can do, but it's definitely for therapy. It's a therapy, specific
Okay.
therapy event that they were talking
It
about.
could
Why
even
did
be
you do?
something that could
Okay.
happen in this area of the pathway
Right.
too.
Yes, that's what I
But
was
we'll
thinking.
talk to them and I can look into what the design standards are for fly
Okay, because
fishing.
maybe if you can go just into the water a little bit. I don't know how deep that water is. I have no idea. But
Over
there
your
were,
head, Patty.
where 16 is, you know, that area there. You could like
Feet.
bring sand in and do something so they could get into, I don't know how big it is there, but.
These are 2-foot contour lines, so we're
Okay.
2 feet, 4 feet, 6 feet.
All right, well, that would work, 2 feet, 4 feet, that would work. Because you were hip waders, right, so, yeah. Just a thought, I
Yeah,
just want to bring it
thank
up, because I've heard it discussed somewhere.
Yeah. Thank you.
One of the things I've seen, I was visiting a park out in the Pacific Northwest, and this particular park had an area, it was a lovely park, and we had an area set aside, fishing question, they had an area set aside that was for kids only. And they just didn't want adults to hog the better spots. So I don't recall if it was like certain days of the week or how they set it, but they had these areas where only kids could fish, kids up to, I think, 15 years of age. So I'm wondering if you could consider perhaps having an area that would be specific for kids. One of the things I think is really heartening is when you go over to DeWitt Park, you see a lot of young kids fishing. I think it's terrific. You know, you see these kids that are out there casting a line or doing whatever, but it's awful nice to see that. And along with that would be the thought that if you perhaps had an area that was set aside for kids to fish and to learn how to fish, you could go back to the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation on their youth initiative and see if there'd be the ability of them to kick in some additional funds for something like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Are you getting notes on here? Thank you. Yes, sir.
I think this is an awesome idea. I had no knowledge of any of this until I saw the public meeting announcement in the Batavia yesterday. And I thought, oh, I think I'll go to this and see what it's all about. This is awesome. I'm very familiar with this area. I walk my dog around it probably twice a week, up and around, and there is a fair amount of traffic on that north side for sure. But you know, I always thought, boy, this is really underutilized. You could really do something here, and I'm glad to see it. I would vote for a dog park, not maybe here, but someplace, because there's a ton of dogs in this. And I think the nearest dog park is Medina
Oh, wow.
from here, so that's 30 minutes plus. Not real convenient. Medina's a small community. I figure if they can support it, probably Batavia could too, someplace. Did I miss it? Is there restroom facilities or anything here or not?
No,
Okay.
unfortunately not. We did talk about that a few times, but at this time, it didn't seem feasible to provide them.
That could be a problem. I mean, I know what happens across the street at Kiwanis Park, so you might want to talk about it. I don't want to bring it up. I'm not going to say specifically.
I don't want to ask what it was.
I'm not going to say anything specifically. I'm just saying, You know,
Okay.
if it starts getting a lot of traffic, we may have to talk about something, whether it's Porta Johns or I don't know, but it's a good point. It's a good
The
question.
town of Wilson has a pier right on the main part where you can do the fishing. They have a picnic pavilion, but they also maintain the plowing year-round, and they also maintain a porta-john year-round. So then at least when the people are ice fishing or on the pier, there is a place. Because what else do you do? Where you gotta have, especially if there's youth or, you know, you have to have something that's feasible, else what's gonna happen is they're gonna go to the neighbors, and then you're gonna have problems with the neighbors.
Yep. Thank you both for those comments. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
We gotta talk about that.
Yep. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Is there plans for trash receptacles, or is it take in, take out sort of idea?
I don't know if that's specifically come up, has it? No. I'm not sure that it has come up.
What does the town usually put in the parks? I know like when I work with City of Buffalo and Erie County, they just wheel in those big trash totes. They prefer those even though they're not that great, but they're easy for the municipalities to empty. I don't know what the town puts in your existing parks.
So presently, our parks are carry in, carry out.
Okay. Okay. I
Right,
assume
think
that
about dog waste
that way.
receptacles too. Is, you know, your one picture, you did have the woman walking her dog, and whether you do a dog park or don't, there's going to be
People are
dogs
gonna
walking
walk
through the
down.
neighborhood for sure. Is that Redfield, Oak, Woodrow Road, that whole neighborhood on that side, there's a million dogs
Yeah,
there.
they all walk at the VA property, so they
Yeah,
more than likely
exactly. I
come
mean,
right over.
I'm thinking,
Yep.
oh, gee, this is great. you know.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a great idea, but you will get that traffic, and there's
Okay.
a lot of people walking
That's a
and
thought.
walking the dogs.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
I have a
Yes.
question about
I mean,
your-
you can't keep the geese,
Yeah.
so that's gonna be an issue, but the dogs, if you have something there, it will get used, and if you don't, it won't get used.
Yep. Good point.
I have a question about your pathway from the VA.
Sure.
You said that it was going to have a gate. So
The
when
V-
would the gate be open?
So I don't know if that has been finalized, but I believe that the plan would be to have a gate there so that the purpose of that particular access is really just for the VA patients and their families, and there'd probably be a code, is my guess. I
So you
don't-
couldn't connect then, yeah.
See,
they would have
because
no
it won't
gate.
connect to
No,
the
no, it wouldn't
Redfield
connect
Bow
then.
area, and
No.
I'm a user of that area, and so I would have to go all the way around if I wanted to
Yeah.
come to your park.
You'd have to come down the sidewalk down
Yeah.
that way and come in.
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal for all the folks on Redfield and Bogue
Yeah,
if
so
that
the
was
VA
not a-
hospital wasn't interested in having, because their facility is secure, it's protected by their security guards, it's currently fenced in now. We'd
No, it's
actually
not
be-
fenced in, it's public.
It's fenced in, on this property line here currently. where
Yeah,
this
but it's,
pink
there's
line
public
is.
use though.
It's open for public use, you're saying on the other
Yes.
side? So we did have the VA at all the meetings, and security was something that they brought up, and they had wanted that feature there. To Molly's point, they said that the security had kind of weighed in on that, and they didn't want to provide a public access through their property. So,
At
You
that
know.
point, and you know what, because I think the reason they have the PTSD and all that, those buildings are all right there, and they really do have to watch those patients, and if that's open and they can just take off, you know what I mean?
I mean, I ride bikes there at 11 o'clock at night, and
No, I know, but
nobody's really.
but to go, but then to go out is what I think what they're saying, maybe, you know, off the property, that's to them, that's like going, they're leaving where it's controlled now. If they have a gate there, maybe that's.
It's
what
not
they're
really
thinking.
controlled. They can leave whenever they want. There's
So
no
what is the
guard.
name of your neighborhood?
It's right. It's the Redfield Parkway
Red-
leads right
Redfield?
into.
Okay, well, we'll
the
make a
VA.
note and we can
It's just
discuss
a
it with the VA center.
I know what you're saying, because if it's
Yeah,
locked,
because it's
then
not
you
really. It's not really. They can leave whenever they want.
Yeah,
the
they
gates
can.
are not locked. I mean,
No.
it's not. It's
Probably
public
don't want a
access.
whole bunch of people wandering through.
No, but I mean,
Right.
I mean,
I'm in that neighborhood too, I'd love to
Yeah.
get through, but I'll happily go around. Yeah. You know,
I was just thinking about that today. I mean, I was in Delaware Park in Buffalo, and there are a lot of access points, you know, all the way around it where people can get in and out. And I was thinking it's nice when you're able to provide that and people can get there from any direction.
Right.
This really is kind of landlocked. I mean, you've got two sides of public roads, but it's landlocked on the other two sides with private properties. And in the stakeholder process, the VA and the Sheriff's Department and Homeland Security were all, you know, concerned about maintaining their own borders and about, you know, not having that type of in and out traffic between the park and those properties. So Monsignor Kirby, that was a little bit more, you know, potentially fluid, but that's also a, you know, senior living community, and they're not sure that they want to open that up for public access either, and if the residents would feel secure. So, I mean, I think the town is just kind of limited, and really what they can only really control what's on their property that they own.
It took us 50 years to get a sidewalk on Richmond Avenue. So now that we've got that,
Yes, sir.
you know, let's hope it doesn't take 50 years to get the park built.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your timeline for the park?
So the construction plans will be ready by the end of May. And then we really just we'll have cost estimates at that point, so we'll be applying for grants. And, you know, it would be great if we could get a grant in the next year and then construct it, you know, in the next year. But it really depends on how quickly the town can secure funding.
So it's at least a year out,
I would say
Right now.
it's likely to be,
a year
Yeah.
or two.
yeah.
What does a park like this typically, I mean, not typically, there's no typical, but, I mean, I have no concept at all. Is this a $1 million park? Is this a $10 million park?
I'd say it's probably more on the lines of 1 million versus 10.
I'm gonna call it 2.5 to 3, based on what I've seen. And it could go a little more than that, depending on what materials Army Corps and DEC require us to use, and whether or not they allow us to take some of the activated material out, or whether we have to replace that in kind. I mean, the detail in how we drill pilings to support these in the water dictate costs. So our design will have to be reviewed and approved by several agencies at the state and federal level. That will dictate cost, but when we do have a solid number, what's most important to me in our community is to see whether or not we have support. And I get a sense that most of the people in this meeting are supportive of this concept. And the advocacy is what gets us the funding. And we'll be soliciting advocacy from all the interested agencies. I was very pleased to hear the city manager say that they will be doing Hometown Heroes banners on streets adjacent to this, and a town board this evening acknowledged that they would like to continue that perhaps on Park Road and just have this as a, I think we talked about names, but a hero-themed
Heroes
park
Park or something, yeah.
for all responders of all types over the ages, located as a gateway to anybody coming to visit Batavia from the through and their first stop. And one part that I did want to mention is that in addition to the electric charging stations for EVs, we discussed charging stations for electric bikes and scooters, so that those that may need that lower voltage access to get enough to get home will be part of our design as well.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you so much. And as I said, please grab snacks and water, and right on our boards in the back, feel free to talk to us one-on-one. Thank you so much for coming.